Hi, my name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and my law firm assists physician assistants with employment contract issues. Today I'm going to talk about how much tail insurance costs for a physician assistant. So first, let's talk about the different types of malpractice policies, and then we'll talk about kind of how much it's going to cost if you have to pay for it. So first, setting's important. If a PA is employed by a hospital or hospital network, normally they'll either be self-insured or have a claims-made policy where they'll cover the cost of tail. So very rarely, if you're a PA and you work for a hospital, well, you have to pay for your own tail insurance. It just doesn't happen very often. Now, if you're in a private physician-owned practice, it's more likely than not that if they have a claims-made policy that you will be responsible for paying the tail cost. So most private practices use one of two types of insurance. So the first is called occurrence-based coverage. With an occurrence-based coverage, it just simply means policy has to be in effect when the malpractice incident occurs, and therefore tail insurance is unnecessary. Now, why would you choose one over the other? Well, occurrence-based coverage is about a third more expensive. So it's kind of a math equation of, all right, would you rather pay, a third more per year to be insured, but not have to pay anything at the end for tail? Or is it better to have a third less per year and then pay the tail cost at the end of it? So for occurrence-based coverage, don't need tail insurance. Now, if it's a claims-made policy, you do. So claims-made policy simply means a policy has to be in effect when the claim is actually made. So if a PA is employed, the agreement is terminated, there's still a gap in between kind of the last patient that the PA saw at the practice and then the last day somebody can sue you. So in most states, it's either 2 years from either when you knew or should have known of the malpractice incident. There are some exceptions for minors when they become adults, but for the most part, 2 years is kind of a good rule of thumb. So in that scenario, if the PA left the employer and didn't have a tail policy and was sued 2 years later, well, they'd be out of luck. They'd have no backup as far as malpractice insurance goes. So almost any employment agreement is going to dictate that one, tail insurance has to be purchased, and then two, who has to pay for it. So how it would work is in the contract, if the PA is responsible to pay for tail, then normally it will state they have to purchase the tail policy prior to the agreement terminating. So usually the last week of their employment, they'd make certain that it's the tail has been secured, and then they'll have to provide some kind of proof to the employer. So tail cost, it's usually around twice what the annual premium is for the PA. So an annual premium is simply how much the employer has to pay to insure the PA on a yearly basis. So you just multiply that number times 2, and then that's how much the PA would have to pay for tail. It's a one-time cost. You don't have to pay it every year, but it does have to be paid upfront. So how much is a normal annual premium for a PA? Because that's going to dictate how much tail is. Usually PAs are somewhere between $1,500 up to $4,000, depending upon specialty, but I'd say $2,000 is around the average. So if you take $2,000, multiply that by 2, tail cost would be around $4,000. So a couple things to think about. One, you certainly can negotiate prior to signing the employment agreement who has to pay for tail. If the employer is just simply unwilling to make changes, the one thing we've had success with is just to say, all right, if the term of my agreement is 3 years, then the employer will then forgive a percentage of the tail cost per year. So you have a 3-year term, then maybe the employer would agree to cover 1/3 of the cost if you stay for 1 year, 2/3 for 2 years, and then they'll pay for all of the tail after 3 years. Some employers are willing to do that versus an all or nothing type thing. Another way of getting out of paying for tail insurance would be if your new employer pays for your old tail. That's called nose coverage. And then another way of getting out of paying for tail is if you are in a state, stay in the same state, the new employer you have is the same insurance company, they'll just roll over your policy into the new one most of the time, and then you wouldn't have to pay for tail insurance. It's not prohibitively expensive for a PA. However, it's still going to be thousands of dollars that the PA is going to have to pay in one big lump sum, and most most people don't want to do that. As I said before, it's more likely than not. Probably like 75% of all private practice jobs require the employee to cover the cost of tail. Something to keep in mind. Is this a deal breaker for most people? Probably not. However, if you're hopping jobs a lot, you're still going to have to pay, and the contract says you're going to have to pay for tail. You're going to have to pay for tail every single time. So if you're going to be long-term with an employer, maybe not that big of a deal if you have to pay for it. If you're going to have a new job every year and you have to pay tail every year, well, that could add up over time. And that may be something you really want to make certain that the employer covers, or even think, all right, well, if a hospital employed job almost always has the employer pay for tail insurance, then maybe I want to lean more towards hospital or hospital network positions versus private practice where I have to pay for it more. So definitely can be negotiated in advance. Deal breaker, probably not, but something to certainly think about. So that's a little primer on tail insurance and how much it costs. If you have any questions, you can always call my law firm at the phone number listed below in the description, or you can always reach us through our website, chellelaw.com, CHELLE law.com. And I appreciate you watching the video. Thanks.